Verses 10 to 20. Barak beats up for volunteers, and soon has his quota of men ready. v10. Deborah had appointed him to raise an army of 10,000 men. v6, and so many he has presently at his feet, following him, and subject to his command. God is said to call us to his feet, Isa 41:2, that is, into obedience to him. Some think it intimates that they were all footmen, and so the armies of the Jews generally were, which made the disproportion of strength between them and the enemy, who had horses and chariots, very great, and the victory the more illustrious, but the presence of God and his prophetess was abundantly sufficient to balance that disproportion. Barak had his men at his feet, which intimates their cheerfulness and readiness to attend him whithersoever he went. Though the tribes of Zebulun and Naphtali were chiefly depended on, yet it appears by Deborah's song that some had come into him from other tribes, Manasseh and Issachar, and more were expected that came not, from Reuben, Dan, and Asher. But these are overlooked here, and we are only told that to make his 10,000 men effective indeed Deborah went up with him. The 11th verse, concerning the removal of Heber, one of the families of the Kenites, out of the wilderness of Judah, in the south, where those families had fixed themselves, ch 1:16, into the northern country, comes in for the sake of what was to follow concerning the exploit of Jael, a wife of that family. Sisera, upon notice of Barak's motions, takes the field with a very numerous and powerful army. v12:13 They showed Sisera, that is, it was shown to him. Yet some think it refers to the Kenites, mentioned immediately before, v11. They gave Sisera notice of Barak's rendezvous, there being peace at this time between Jabin and that family, v17. Whether they intended it as a kindness to him or no, it served to accomplish what God had said by Deborah, v7 I will draw unto thee Sisera. Sisera's confidence was chiefly in his chariots, therefore particular notice is taken of them, 900 chariots of iron, which, with the scythes fastened to their axletrees, when they were driven into an army of footmen, did terrible execution. So ingenious have men been in inventing methods of destroying one another, to gratify those lusts from which come wars and fightings. Deborah gives orders to engage the enemy, v14. Josephus says that when Barak saw Sisera's army drawn up, and attempting to surround the mountain on the top of which he and his forces lay encamped, his heart quite failed him, and he determined to retire to a place of greater safety, but Deborah animated him to make a descent upon Sisera, assuring him that this was the day marked out in the divine counsels for his defeat. Now they appear most threatening, they are ripe for ruin. The thing is as sure to be done as if it were done already, the Lord hath delivered Sisera into thy hand. See how the work and honor of this great action are divided between Deborah and Barak. She, as the head, gives the word, he, as the hand, does the work. Thus does God dispense his gifts variously. But, though ordinarily the head of the woman is the man, 1 Co 11:3, he that has the residue of the Spirit was pleased to cross hands, and to put the head upon the woman's shoulders, choosing the weak things of the world to shame the mighty, that no flesh might glory in his presence. It was well for Barak that he had Deborah with him, for she made up what was defective in his conduct, by telling him, this is the day. In his courage, by assuring him of God's presence, has not the Lord gone out before thee? Darest not thou follow when thou hast God himself for thy leader? Note: in every undertaking it is good to be satisfied that God goes before us, that we are in the way of our duty and under his direction. If we have ground to hope that God goes before us, we ought to go on with courage and cheerfulness. Be not dismayed at the difficulties thou meetest with in resisting Satan, in serving God, or suffering for him, for has not the Lord gone out before thee? Follow him fully then. God himself routs the enemy's army, v15. Barak, in obedience to Deborah's orders, went down into the valley, though there upon the plain the iron chariots would have so much the more advantage against him, quitting his fastnesses upon the mountain in dependence upon the divine power, for in vain is salvation hoped for from hills and mountains, in the Lord alone is the salvation of his people. And he was not deceived in his confidence, the Lord discomfited Sisera. It was not so much the bold and surprising alarm which Barak gave their camp that dispirited and dispersed them, but God's terror seized their spirits and put them into an unaccountable confusion. The stars, it seems, fought against them. Josephus says that a violent storm of hail which beat in their faces gave them this rout, disabled them, and drove them back, so that they became a very easy prey to the army of Israel, and Deborah's words were made good, "The Lord has delivered them into thy hand, it is now in thy power to do what thou wilt with them." Barak bravely improves his advantage, follows the blow with undaunted resolution and unwearied diligence, prosecutes the victory, pursues the scattered forces, even to their general's headquarters at Harosheth, v16, and spares none whom God had delivered into his hand to be destroyed. There was not a man left. When God goes before us in our spiritual conflicts, we must bestir ourselves, and, when by grace he gives us some success against the enemies of our souls, we must improve it by watchfulness and resolution, and carry on the holy war with vigor. We have seen the army of the Canaanites totally routed. It is said, PS 83:9-10, where the defeat of this army is pleaded as a precedent for God's doing the like in after times, that they became as dung for the earth. Now here we have the fall of their general, Sisera, captain of the host, in whom, it is likely, Jabin their king put an entire confidence, and therefore was not himself present in the action. Let us trace the steps of this mighty man's fall. He quitted his chariot, and took to his feet, v15:17. His chariots had been his pride and his confidence, and we may suppose he had therefore despised and defied the armies of the living God, because they were all on foot, and had neither chariot nor horse, as he had. Justly therefore is he thus made ashamed of his confidence, and forced to quit it, and thinks himself then most safe and easy when he has got clear of his chariot, though we may well suppose it the best made, and best drawn, of any of them. Thus are those disappointed who rest on the creature, like a broken reed, it not only breaks under them, but runs into their hand, and pierceth them with many sorrows. The idle may quickly become a burden, Isa 46:1, and what we were sick for God can make us sick of. How miserable doth Sisera look now he is dismounted! It is hard to say whether he bless hate or trembleth more. Put not your trust in princes, if they may so soon be brought to this, if he who but lately trusted to his arms with so much assurance must now trust to his heels only with so little. He fled for shelter to the tents of the Kenites, having no stronghold, nor any place of his own in reach to retire to. The mean and solitary way of the Kenites living, perhaps, he had formerly despised and ridiculed, and the more because religion was kept up among them, yet now he is glad to put himself under the protection of one of these tents, and he chooses the wife's tent or apartment, either because less suspected, or because it happened to be next to him, and the first he came to, v17. And that which encouraged him to go thither was that at this time there was peace between his master and the house of Heber, not that there was any league offensive and defensive between them, only at present there were no indications of hostility. Jabin did them no harm, did not oppress them as he did the Israelites, their plain, quiet, harmless way of living making them not suspected nor feared, and perhaps God so ordering it as a recompense for their constant adherence to the true religion. Sisera thought he might therefore be safe among them, not considering that, though they themselves suffered not by Jabin's power, they heartily sympathized with the Israel of God that did. Jael invited him in, and bade him very welcome. Probably she stood at the tent door, to inquire what news from the army, and what the success of the battle which was fought not far off. She invited him in. Perhaps she stood waiting for an opportunity to show kindness to any distressed Israelite, if there should be occasion for it, but seeing Sisera come in great haste, panting and out of breath, she invited him to come and repose himself in her tent, in which, while she seemed to design the relieving of his fatigue, perhaps she really intended the retarding of his flight, that he might fall into the hands of Barak, who was not in a hot chase after him, v18, and it may well questioned whether she had at first any thought of taking away his life, but rather God afterwards put it into her heart. She made very much of him, and seemed mighty careful to have him easy, as her invited guest. Was he weary? She finds him a very convenient place to repose himself in, and recruit his strength. Was he thirsty? Well, he might. Did he want a little water to cool his tongue? The best liquor her tent afforded was at his service, and that was milk, v19, which, we may suppose, he drank heartily of, and, being refreshed with it, was the better disposed to sleep. Was he cold, or afraid of catching cold? Or did he desire to be hid from the pursuers, if they should search that tent? She covered him with a mantle, v18. All expressions of care for his safety. Only when he desired her to tell a lie for him, and to say he was not there, she declined making any such promise, v20. We must not sin against God, no, not to oblige those we would show ourselves most observant of. Lastly, we must suppose she kept her tent as quiet as she could, and free from noise, that he might sleep the sooner and the faster. And now was Sisera least safe when he was most secure? How uncertain and precarious is human life! And what assurance can we have of it, when it may so easily be betrayed by those with whom it is trusted, and those may prove its destroyers who we hoped would be its protectors? It is best making God our friend, for he will not deceive us.